Hello and welcome to this new video, once again in the rain, where we're going to talk about a current topic. Because I'm going to share with you my 8 methods to stop having problems with slugs and other gastropods. These are methods that seem quite respectful to me, except maybe the last one. You'll see it in a moment. But in any case, they're effective. And these are methods that I use myself in my work pretty much every day during this season. So we'll start with the first methods, which are quite gentle. It's a somewhat rosy view of slugs, but I find them all pretty effective. Finally, we'll finish with one last very aggressive method. When you hit certain limits and must act, you'll notice more radical methods. So in this video, I won't talk to you about methods that, in my opinion, aren't effective or at least not worthwhile. Like, for example, buying beer to give to your slugs. If I buy beer, it's just to drink it, so let's not discuss putting ash on your crops. Eggshells either, pheromone, not at all, slug slurry, all those methods, I don't use them, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm going to tell you about more natural methods, or at least ones that respect the ethics of permaculture. Before we get into the methods, a few little things that work no matter what. If you want to tackle the problem of slugs, now I say slugs, but I mean all gastropods, including snails. To tackle this so-called enemy, you first need to listen, understand it, and put yourself in the shoes of a hunter or trapper who studies prey to approach it better. For example, we'll learn about their rhythm. We'll realize that slugs are more active at night, of course, or in the morning. We often see them, and in the evening, quite late, we can see them a little bit. We'll realize that they're definitely more active. They're definitely active when it's humid or raining, whether at night or during the day. We'll see them a little more, so really humidity and rain make them more active. We'll spot them more easily, and we'll also be able to figure out their periods of activity. In the middle of winter, when it's cold, they're not there. In the middle of summer, when it's too dry, they're not there either. And we'll notice that in spring, right at the end of winter, there's a period when they swarm because their predators aren't awake yet. The young plants that are starting to grow have woken up a little earlier, and the slugs, when they start to wake up, begin to reproduce. There are many of them during this time. This video was filmed in early May. It was about a month ago when they started to wake up and become quite active. About a month ago it was a bit of a dry period, so we can assume they weren't able to reproduce. They weren't as active as they wanted due to dryness, but now rain is coming. So logically we know that now is when the slugs will be very active, and that's when we'll need to be careful. Often when I say it's good to know a little about slugs, it's good to take an interest in them to understand how they live. Personally, when I started to take an interest in them, I got into it little by little. Be less afraid, less worried, and appreciate them more. This is the start of the video. It's a bit soft and fuzzy, but I like it. I love slugs. They're beautiful and fascinating animals. And you'll see that by taking an interest in them, by getting to know their rhythm and so on, it can make them interesting. And we could even quickly see that they have a huge benefit in the garden. We'll see it little by little here in the video. We'll talk about it again. And now we're going to get into the part you're here for. We'll start with the first effective method to properly manage slugs. This method is to encourage biodiversity. The more biodiversity you have in your garden, the more balance you'll have. I'll refer you back to the first video on slugs, which covers this topic. I'll include a link. There's also another video about promoting biodiversity. So I'll also put a link for you in which I talk about how to promote biodiversity and the benefits it can have. So I'll summarize it for you. Promoting biodiversity can mean having at least one pond in your garden. Most people who mention major slug issues don't have garden ponds. A pond will attract slugs. For example, toads, which prey on slugs, along with many other creatures, help regulate the garden beyond just controlling slugs. Having piles of brush, piles of branches in a corner of the garden that will attract hedgehogs. They are major predators of slugs. Having mulch and everything that attracts slugs, because in there it shelters the predators of slugs. Ground beetles are major predators of slugs. So go check out the other videos, for which I've put the links, and you'll see more details about that. But know that by encouraging biodiversity, you'll promote balance. That's really a gentle method, very simple, but it works in the long term. It's not by doing this that overnight you'll balance your garden, but in the long term it will make it easier to balance. Where it will be interesting is that it will mostly delay or even eliminate problems in your garden. But in any case, it will often delay the moment when you'll need to take stronger, more radical action. In general, it works, and then sometimes in extreme cases you still have to go a bit further. But anyway, what is certain is that encouraging biodiversity, increasing biodiversity, boosting the biodiversity in your garden will balance things out quite effectively. The second method is to plant vigorous plants in your garden. Just a quick note here, in this video I'm really talking about plants in the ground, in the garden, not about plants that are in pots in a greenhouse. There, the methods can be completely different. Here I'm really talking about the plants, the vegetation that you're going to plant in your garden, in your vegetable patch. So you'll need to put in the most vigorous plants possible, the best developed ones, not small, fragile plants. Those are easy prey for slugs. That's what I'm going to talk to you about. On the one hand, one of the interests that slugs have in a garden is that all these animals, including slugs, snails generally eat plants that are weak, fragile, sick, or attacked by fungi. When they have a choice, and if they don't have a choice, they can eat healthy plants if they have nothing else to eat. We'll discuss this later, but if the plant is small and weak, one stroke of the radula finishes it. The radula is the slightly rough tongue of gastropods. You can't really call it a stroke for slugs, it doesn't work that way. Let me return to the method. The idea is all the plants you put in the garden will need to be in good shape, in good health, nice and vigorous, well developed, big enough so that the slugs don't go after those ones first. If you have several plants and among them 2 or 3 lettuce plants that are weaker or punier, those are definitely their targets. You can even often see on a lettuce that the big vigorous leaves, or at least the big well-developed leaves, are a bit less attacked. On the other hand, if you lift and look at the older, slightly more damaged leaves underneath, it's often those that they attack. Here I can show you a few pictures as well. I took some shots. Often you can see that a leaf that has been damaged, a leaf that's a bit attacked by fungi, is a part of the leaf that starts to rot. That's the part that the slug starts to eat. There is quite a bit of scientific research on this. There are a lot of really interesting things that come out of it. For example, the fact that slugs eat mushrooms and spores. And something that has been noticed is that there are plenty of beneficial mushrooms, mycorrhizal mushrooms or other mushrooms that are in any case beneficial for soil life and for plants. When slugs eat those mushrooms, their spores are released in the slug's droppings. So they will help to develop and spread these mushrooms in your areas, in your gardens. On the other hand, a pathogenic fungus, a cryptogamic disease, attacks a plant, a leaf. If the slug eats the spores, it digests them instead of releasing them in its droppings. So the slug will be a gardener's helper. It will help regulate, help destroy the bad fungi, at least the pathogens, and help disperse and spread those that are beneficial. It's really interesting and it's actually really well done. So that brings me to the second method, which is, if possible, the direct sowing method. It's not possible for all plants, for tomatoes, squash and so on. It doesn't always work, although it depends on the region you live in. But in any case, if possible, use direct sowing. Again, the typical example is lettuce, which is what slugs eat the most. We often have problems with lettuce being eaten by slugs and snails. If you can sow directly, a lettuce that has germinated directly in the soil will be less attractive because it's more vigorous for gastropods. A lettuce that has been transplanted at the time of planting, on top of that, we will have touched its roots, we will have weakened it a bit, it will be less established in its ecosystem, and then it will be easy prey for slugs. With direct seeding, I quickly noticed that there are lettuces that aren't attacked at all. You might assume that during germination, the fragile seedling, cotyledons and first leaves would be easy prey. Well, no, slugs attack plants that have germinated directly much less. Direct sowing on your soil allows you to plant more at once. People often tell me they planted 10 lettuces and 7, 8, 9 or even all 10 were eaten. If you have a family of 3 or 4, 10 lettuces will be gone in 4 or 5 days. Buying them is expensive, but for the same price you can get a seed packet with many more seeds. An even more effective method is to produce your own seeds, and then you can have kilos of them. I was going to say maybe not that much, but you can have plenty. And so with all these quantities of seeds, you'll regularly broadcast sow lettuce and you'll have them sprouting everywhere. Here, I'm discussing lettuce as an example. You can do this with other things, but in any case, know that the example of direct sowing is generally very effective. Fourth method is going to be to use, especially during periods when we have major problems with slugs. Remember when I mentioned the end of winter at the start? That's when they swarm. The times when we're going to have a lot of rain, that's when they swarm. If possible, use colorful plants during those times. that are unusual, not green or a dark red or brown. I'll stick with my example of lettuce because it's quite easy to illustrate the issue. Green lettuces are generally more attractive than red or brown lettuces. And on top of that, there are lots of varieties, often with very interesting flavors. I'm a big fan of Batavia Goutte de Sang with its small speckled leaves, and Mouchete de Salas, which is also excellent. Batavia has leaves with a slightly reddish tint, which makes it less attractive. And there's also the Rouge Grenobloise, which is interesting as well. The red chicory of Veron has returned with stronger flavors, but its leaves are now much less appealing. Red oak leaf, red winter romaine lettuce. So it's the same for all seasons. We'll have different ones: red mizuna, red curly lettuce. So there you go, browse a bit at your seed suppliers, wherever you get your seeds, and take a look at these plants. It's not just in salads that you find this, but in any case, all the more unusual leafy plants are great, generally a bit less attractive, but that doesn't mean they're not attractive at all. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but overall it's slightly better. Fifth method, it's going to be to prepare them for the attack. We're going to say, okay, they're going to be attacked, so we're going to make sure they get ready. Most plants have defense mechanisms, so we're going to stimulate these defense mechanisms by stressing them a little bit. So for that, thank you, Damien, because it was in one of your videos that I saw you doing that. I tried it, though I haven't tested it much yet. I'm currently experimenting with ways to stress them. I'll give more detailed feedback on that later. So what Damien said in his video was that before planting his lettuces, or I don't remember exactly what he was planting, but I think it was lettuces too. It's about slightly chewing, pinching or scratching the leaves with your fingers as if slugs were attacking them. And most plants, when they're attacked, will load up on a certain active compound, tannins, to make themselves less digestible. I don't know if you remember, if you've heard about the story of the kudu antelopes and the acacias. I'll try to quickly summarize the story. It's a great story, so check it out elsewhere. It's easy to find. But basically, the kudu, before being raised in parks in Africa like they are today, used to feed on acacias and move from one acacia tree to another. They nibbled here and there, moving against the wind. Generally, once we brought in our somewhat Western methods of breeding and we told them to make it more profitable, you need to have enclosures with your own animals, you're going to keep them in enclosures. Always the same acacias. And then one day, there were deaths. Some kudu antelopes died while appearing to be in good health. After autopsies and investigations, we found they had poisoned themselves by constantly eating the acacias. Because the acacias were indigestible, when they could move around, the antelopes didn't have this problem. What happened is that the acacias, after being nibbled on so much, they sensed that they were being nibbled on, and so they started to fill up with these tannins and became indigestible. The antelopes knew this. That's why they went from tree to tree. And another thing we realized is that the acacias, when they were attacked, in addition to filling up with tannins, released a gas, an ethylene, to warn their fellow trees. Antelopes were attacking to make the other plants too get ready, the other plants ready for defense. And that's also why, as a result, the antelopes moved against the wind when they nibbled on the acacias, so that the new acacias they were going to nibble on wouldn't be warned. So I'm coming back to my story about the lettuce. I think it's the same for a lot of plants. If they're attacked, if they start being attacked, they'll fill up with tannins and become a bit less digestible. What I tried as a method here is, instead of making the attack myself, because just being chewed on by fingers might do something, but maybe the saliva from the slug triggers something else too. So what I do now is my lettuce plants, before putting them directly into the ground, I keep them in pots, protected. I prefer well-developed plants, so I put them outside for a while and wait for a few attacks. And then every time I try to keep an eye on them, and whenever I see some lettuce plants that are a bit attacked, I remove the slug, keep it in the greenhouse for a few days, then plant it directly. So there you go, this test is a bit new. I'll let you know how the method of exposing them to slugs works out. Check the lettuces before planting. Now the sixth method that I use a lot is to protect the plants from slugs. So when you're going to plant something, a young seedling, The simplest method is to find a bottle, to use a plastic bottle. That's really the easiest. I'm sorry for using plastic. There might be other things you can use instead, but this is going to be very, very simple. All the plastic bottles you have, this gives them a second use. Also, I basically use the upper part from which I remove the cap so it can still breathe. We don't want to suffocate the plants, so we plant young seedlings in the ground and cover them with a bottle to make a little greenhouse. So in addition, we keep the young seedlings warm, and especially for the first 2-3 days, 3-4 days, 5-6 days. It depends on the plants, it depends on the weather. There you adjust, and especially the first night, in fact I mean the first few days. Usually I set my bottles in the evening and remove them in the morning. If it's humid or rainy and the rain persists, I sometimes leave them on. If it's sunny during the day, I still make sure to take them off in the morning. And that's it, I put them back on in the evening, at least for the first few days, and once the plants are well developed, I remove them for good. This is helpful, especially when the plant is fragile, to keep slugs away. They could enter through the small hole at the top, but usually don't, and look elsewhere instead. It shields plants during their most vulnerable times and is so effective that slugs stay away entirely. For me, there's really nothing more effective than this method. So at first, of course, it's very easy to do. Small gardens and vegetable patches are easy to manage. It's more complicated on large farms, but still possible. It takes a bit of time, a bit of labor, but when I see how effective it is, I think, well, it's worth the time spent after all. So I come to the 7th method, I think, which is a bit similar to the first one, where I talked about biodiversity. This method is about feeding the slugs. We need slugs in our ecosystems. After all, gastropods are important. And if they eat our lettuce, if they eat our vegetables, it's because they're hungry, it's because they need to eat. So it's either about thinking of feeding them or making sure they have something to eat anyway. When you see a garden that's too clean, too tidy, too well weeded, just imagine it's like a kind of desert. When you put a lettuce right in the middle, the slug, when it sees that and has nothing else to eat, will definitely eat that lettuce. Even if we follow the previous advice to have a beautiful, strong and healthy plant, if it's hungry and that's all there is, it'll eat it anyway. So the idea is to make sure to let other plants grow around, even wild plants. You don't need to grow things just for the slugs. Let wild plants grow, have a garden with plant cover instead of just mulching. Mulching is nice, it's effective, it protects the soil from the weather, the sun and so on, it shelters life and all that. But mulching prevents seeds from germinating. It's a bit of a drawback if we stop plants from sprouting. And if we only put our own vegetable plants there, the ones we want to eat, behind that it remains a plant desert with only our vegetable plants and the slug. The slug sees it as a plant desert, and anyway it will revert to the one we want and the only thing available to eat. The idea is to ensure not only our plants grow, but also a variety of vegetation. There are other things we can do too, like using our waste, for example kitchen scraps, peels and so on. They like to eat that, plus it will get covered in mushrooms, rot in the garden, and they'll enjoy eating it. We can also put kitchen waste almost anywhere. Another method that I personally like to use is when we're going to plant a lettuce or a fairly large lettuce. We can remove or trim some old leaves from this young lettuce plant and place the oldest ones beside it. Assuming the slug comes to eat, it will eat that leaf first. And leave our young plant alone. It's even more effective and prevents us from hurting our lettuce plant. If you plant lettuce at a time when you're eating it, also when you're eating lettuce and when you're preparing your salad, all the leaves you remove when you clean your lettuce before eating it, you keep them aside. For when you're going to plant new ones, that's where you wrap your lettuce leaves. Make sure there's something for the slug to eat so it doesn't have only your plant to eat. That too is a method that's really foolproof. So all of that, those were the nice, gentle, friendly methods where we don't harm the slugs. We respect them. These aren't methods that always appeal to professionals, to dedicated market gardeners focused on vegetable production. Seeing some gardeners who say, it's nice, your method's all soft and cuddly, but us, when we really have slug problems and we want to eat, we have no choice. We have to kill them from time to time. So now I'm going to tell you about a method where maybe you'll change the way you see me. It happens that I kill slugs, it happens that I deliberately kill slugs, but not many. So now I'm going to tell you about my method, which I call the radical surgical strike method, where we kill certain slugs, not all of them, not just anyway, and in a pretty precise manner so that it rebalances the system. To understand the effect and effectiveness of this method, I'll first tell you a little bit about the diversity of slugs we have in our gardens. There are many types of slugs. They don't all have the same rhythms, the same ways of behaving, and above all, not all of them have the same diet. Some slugs only eat plants, and other slugs don't always eat just plants. I call them carnivores, and we discuss carnivorous slugs, but they aren't just that. They also eat plants like lettuce and basically everything. Occasionally they eat some other slugs. And the idea is to encourage them to eat slugs, to promote these carnivorous slugs, and to rebalance the system. I enjoy applying this permaculture principle that says, with nature, we work with it. So here we're going to try to encourage that, and especially this principle that says, we'll focus on taking the smallest action for the biggest impact. This method is simple. Sensitive viewers, please stop here and watch the first methods at the start of the video. We're really in the method where we're going to kill slugs, but we're not going to kill them in a cowardly way, where we don't see them die. We're going to kill them. I meant by hand. We're not using iron phosphate products, since even though iron phosphate isn't toxic and is used in organic farming, it's still a chemical that kills slugs. But by killing the slugs, we're killing the predators. And even if we don't kill the predator with the lethal side of iron phosphate, in any case we starve the predators by killing their prey. So the idea isn't to do that. The idea is to encourage certain predators, especially the carnivorous slugs, by killing. My method is a pair of scissors. I walk around the garden with a pair of scissors. I don't kill many. The idea is to kill 1 per square meter, maybe 2 or 3, when there's a real infestation, to kill the big slugs, so that these dead slugs feed other slugs. I'm going to try in a jumble to explain to you how you can see how effective this method is, and how do we know there are carnivorous slugs. Often a question that comes up is, which ones are the carnivorous slugs? How do we recognize them? When you know them, that's good. If you don't know them, the best way to get to know them is anyway, kill a few slugs, any kind, 2 or 3. After killing a slug, return in 2 or 3 hours or the next day if done in the evening. It's pretty effective to come back 2 or 3 hours later anyway, because it works pretty quickly. If nothing happens in a few hours, return tomorrow. Kill a few slugs, come back a little while later, and you will definitely see other slugs eating them, and that's when you'll see which ones. Those are the carnivores, because obviously the slugs that come to eat them, if they're eating slugs, then those are the ones that eat slugs. The ones you'll usually see are the big striped slugs.
I sort of like this image.
The worst ones are the ones we don't see, those little grey ones that are often hidden under small leaves or even burrow underground. We don't see those, they're the worst. They're not the ones we notice first or pick up to toss to the neighbor using the throwing method. A little nod to Olivier for one of his latest videos where he talked about it. Joked about tossing slugs to the neighbor. Joking about throwing slugs, the neighbor throwing slugs a bit further away. It's not often the most effective method. It will throw things off balance, and besides, when you throw a big slug, it's not necessarily to the neighbor's place. Maybe at the limit we might acquire, possibly we can mix, and then we'll move on to the little grey slugs, which are not carnivorous. So I'm coming back to the method of not throwing the system off balance, or at least not making it tip into another imbalance. What happens if slugs overpopulate and eat our plants? Carnivorous slugs slugs that can be carnivorous can also eat plants. But it's a bit like many other living beings. If you get them used to a certain diet, they'll go for that diet more easily. So, by regularly killing certain slugs, we're going to favor the carnivorous slugs. We're going to push them at least to eat those dead slugs. They'll get used to that food and eat more of it. That's my explanation and what I've observed in my growing areas. So what you're going to do is, once in a while, with a pair of scissors, a stick, a skewer, anything, you're going to kill some slugs. It's not pleasant to do and all that for sure. I don't like doing it. I'm not saying you have to enjoy killing those animals. But in any case, if we need a solution to deal with the problem of a slug infestation and we want to kill them, we're still discussing a lasting method, respectful of our ecosystem. Killing a few slugs will move you. Once to kill a few, I was saying 1 or 2 or 3 per square meter. You don't need to kill many, you'll see it's very effective. What if you're in a slug-heavy area and it's your first time dealing with many at once? You'll need to repeat the operation a few times during a period when it rains a lot, like right now. Do it again 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Anyway, you'll see that after a while you'll have fewer and fewer problems with slugs. You'll sometimes see some big carnivorous slugs eating another one that you killed a while ago. But you'll see them eating your plants less and less. And what will happen is that the populations of carnivorous slugs will increase, and in addition, they'll get more used to eating other slugs. And naturally, the populations of slugs that only eat plants will gradually decrease and the balance will be restored. In your case, or at least your wish to harvest certain vegetables. There you go, I hope I wasn't too unclear. I feel like I got sidetracked again. I'm just so excited about this method, which is really super effective. I've practiced it regularly for 2 or 3 years in the spring. So yes, I do kill some slugs. I kill a few, not often, not many, but in any case, thanks to this method, I really have very few. I'll show you a few pictures here. I really have very few problems with slugs, and when I do, it's quickly taken care of. I've never had a time when everything gets eaten like many of you have. I see many comments from people desperate to plant specific types of plants. Sometimes everything falls apart and we have no solution left. So, try all of this and let me know what you think. I hope you enjoyed the video and that these methods will be effective for you. As always, leave feedback in the video comments to let me know if it worked for you. That's it anyway. Stop putting ash, don't put too much, it destroys the soil. Stop giving beer to your slugs and drink some yourself, it's more fun. Above all, don't buy Theramol. It's a shame to support the big industries that make this when there are much simpler methods that also use an ecosystem that's there to help us. It also lets us appreciate slugs and notice these creatures, which I think is great. You'll see that after a while we're less afraid of them, and when we're less afraid we're more likely to take an interest in them and observe them. And that's really great. The services they can provide us, so as usual, if you enjoyed it, you can subscribe to the channel and share the video with others. If you like my channel and want to support me, you can do so on the Tipeee platform. And a big thank you, as always, to everyone who already does. Thanks to you, I can keep making these videos. Thank you all, and see you soon in the next videos. Bye.